Chelsea Grimm, a 32-year-old woman from San Diego, California, vanished under puzzling circumstances during a cross-country road trip in late September 2023. What began as a routine journey quickly turned into a troubling mystery that continues to baffle her family, friends, and investigators alike. Chelsea left San Diego on September 24, 2023, with the goal of reaching Connecticut to attend a family wedding. Accompanying her on this trip was her beloved pet bearded dragon, Roz, also known as Roxy. She had originally planned to fly, but when the airline refused to allow her reptile on board, Chelsea opted instead to make the long drive across the country. On September 27th, Chelsea arrived in Phoenix, Arizona, where she met up with her sister and a friend. However, the next day, she unexpectedly canceled lunch plans with that same friend. Later that day, she was seen at a motel in Seligman, Arizona, trying to rent a room. Witnesses said she appeared confused and attempted to pay with euros rather than US dollars, an odd detail that left many unsettled. That evening, Chelsea contacted her parents from the motel. She explained that she wouldn't make it to the wedding after all. The road trip was taking longer than anticipated. Instead, she said she planned to camp nearby for a few days before heading back home to California. On September 28th, a police officer encountered Chelsea near a war memorial in Williams, Arizona. She had parked her car there and seemed emotionally overwhelmed after taking photos for a personal photography project honoring lost soldiers. She told the officer she didn't feel comfortable driving in her emotional state. The officer suggested a few safe places to camp, including the nearby Love's truck stop. 2 days later, on September 30th, a woodcutter reported seeing Chelsea near Ash Fork, Arizona. She was camping in her car and, according to the witness, didn't appear to be in distress or in need of help. But that would be the last confirmed sighting of Chelsea Grimm. On October 3rd, a group of hunters discovered her white 2019 Ford Escape SUV abandoned along Forest Service Road 6 in the Kaibab National Forest, northeast of Ash Fork. The vehicle had 2 flat tires. The following day, with no contact from their daughter, Chelsea's parents filed a missing person report with the Phoenix Police Department. Inside the vehicle, authorities found some of her belongings, including clothes and a camera. However, her wallet, phone, sleeping bag, and her pet bearded dragon were missing. The SUV was locked, and there were no signs of a struggle or foul play. There has been no activity on her bank account, cell phone, or social media since she disappeared. Despite a thorough investigation, Chelsea's case appears to have hit a dead end. With no solid leads, theories have emerged. Some believe she may have experienced a mental health crisis, especially given her confusion when trying to pay with foreign currency and the strange decision to leave her camera, an item she typically never parted with. Others speculate about a potential abduction, or that she fell victim to opportunistic criminals after her car became disabled. Another theory suggests she may have accepted help from someone with ill intentions. Determined to find answers, Chelsea's family hired a private investigator to assist in the search. Unfortunately, their efforts have yet to yield results. To this day, the fate of Chelsea Grimm remains a mystery. Her loved ones continue to hope for her safe return, holding on to any glimmer of hope that new information might emerge and bring her home. It was a clear July morning in 1920 when Charles Stevens, a 58-year-old barber from Bristol, England, stood at the edge of the Niagara River, staring down one of nature's most powerful wonders. Behind him, the crowd watched in curious silence. Ahead, the thundering roar of Niagara Falls promised either glory or a grave. Charles wasn't a professional daredevil. He wasn't rich or famous. He was a father of 11, a working man who had grown restless with the ordinary. Inspired by tales of thrill-seekers who had tried, and sometimes survived, the plunge over the falls in barrels, he was drawn across the Atlantic with a singular goal: become the first Englishman to survive Niagara Falls in a barrel, and, hopefully, turn that glory into fortune. The daredevil scene at Niagara was buzzing in those days. A few had made the drop and lived to tell the tale, reaping brief moments of fame. Charles saw it as a ticket out of obscurity. He believed that with the right design and enough courage, he could beat the falls and cash in on the spotlight that followed. His barrel was built to be tough, crafted from stout oak, bound with metal hoops, and reinforced to take the crushing blow of the 167-foot plunge. At its base sat a 100-pound anvil, meant to act as ballast, to keep the barrel upright during the fall. It made sense in theory. The heavier the bottom, the more stable the fall. But nature rarely plays along with theories. Charles, calm and determined, climbed into his wooden capsule, shut in by the sound of the water crashing around him. His assistants gave the barrel a final push into the current, and just like that, he was off. The river seized the barrel instantly, tossing it like a toy in a bathtub. It spun, rocked, and slammed against waves as it raced toward the precipice. The crowd, now breathless, watched as the barrel edged closer to the drop. It teetered for a split second, then plunged into the mist with a thunderous crash, swallowed by the raw force of the falls. Then came silence. For a few agonizing minutes, the crowd waited, eyes scanning the frothing water below, hoping for a sign, anything. Then debris began to surface. Pieces of shattered wood drifted downriver. And then, among the wreckage, something more horrifying. A human arm, still strapped inside a section of the barrel. Charles Stevens had not survived. The very anvil meant to keep him stable had become the cause of his death. The weight had dragged the barrel with such force that when it slammed into the rocks below, it exploded on impact. The structure had offered no protection. There was no second chance, no miracle survival, only tragedy. Charles Stevens' fatal attempt was a sobering moment for Niagara Falls and for the daredevil culture that had flourished around it. His story didn't end in glory or riches, but in wreckage and mourning. Authorities later used his death as a cautionary tale, discouraging future stunts and warning others that the falls, no matter how inviting the fame, were no place for amateurs or illusions of control. He was a man chasing a dream, hoping for immortality. Instead, he became a warning, a footnote in the long history of those who underestimated nature's fury. Charles Stevens' story remains not one of success, but of stark reality. The falls don't negotiate, and even the best-laid plans can be torn apart in seconds by a force that doesn't care who you are. It was supposed to be a peaceful hike through one of the Pacific Northwest's most beautiful trails, but what began as a scenic walk along Clahane Ridge in Washington's Olympic National Park ended in an unexpected and tragic encounter with a wild animal, one that had long shown signs of aggressive behavior. On a Saturday in October, 63-year-old Robert Boardman was hiking with his wife and a friend, taking in the crisp air and sweeping views of the mountainous landscape. As they paused for a quiet lunch along the ridge, an all-too-familiar presence emerged from the brush, a mountain goat known to park rangers for its troubling behavior. This wasn't a fleeting moment of curiosity or a typical wildlife sighting. The goat, roughly 3 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing in at over 250 pounds, was no stranger to humans. In fact, it had developed an alarming habit of approaching visitors, not in fear, but with unsettling boldness. Rangers had previously tried to deter the goat's behavior. According to park spokeswoman Barb Maines, staff had used non-lethal hazing tactics, firing beanbags and tossing rocks to reinforce the message that people were to be avoided. Despite these efforts, there had been no prior attacks or direct injuries to warrant its removal from the park. That changed that day. As the goat approached, Boardman stood up and attempted to scare it off. Witnesses say he positioned himself between the animal and his companions, trying to drive it away. But the goat didn't retreat. In a sudden and violent act, it lunged at Boardman, goring him in the leg. The impact was devastating. Mountain goats, despite their seemingly docile appearance, are equipped with sharp horns and powerful builds capable of inflicting serious harm. Even more chilling, the goat reportedly stood over Boardman after the attack, refusing to leave. It wasn't until a park ranger arrived and hurled rocks at the animal that it finally backed off, giving others the chance to reach the injured hiker. Emergency services were dispatched quickly, and a U.S. Coast Guard helicopter arrived to airlift Boardman to a nearby hospital in Port Angeles. Tragically, the injuries were too severe. He was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The Olympic National Park community was left stunned. Not only was the incident rare, it was believed to be the first fatality caused by a mountain goat in the park's history. Mountain goats, found only in North America, generally avoid human contact. But in this case, something had clearly gone wrong. Officials believe the animal had become habituated to human presence, possibly attracted to the salt found in sweat and urine, which hikers inadvertently leave behind on trails. Over time, the goat had lost its natural wariness, a potentially dangerous development when combined with its territorial instincts. In response to the attack, park rangers made the difficult decision to track down and euthanize the goat. While a tragic outcome, it was deemed necessary to protect other visitors from a similar fate. Approximately 300 mountain goats call Olympic National Park home. While they typically roam the remote alpine areas, encounters with hikers aren't unheard of, especially in more trafficked sections of the park. Wildlife experts stress the importance of maintaining a respectful distance from all animals, no matter how harmless they may appear. Human interaction, even unintentional, can alter wild animals' behavior in ways that create risk for everyone. It was June 14th, 1969, a perfect summer day for an escape into nature. And their two sons, Dennis and his older brother, had set out for a weekend camping trip in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. They were looking for peace, a break from city life, and a chance to just breathe under the open sky. They pitched their tents at Spence Field, a serene spot surrounded by lush greenery and rolling hills. Laughter echoed through the campsite as the boys ran around, enjoying the fresh mountain air. Everything seemed perfect. That afternoon, Dennis and his brother were invited to play hide-and-seek with two other boys nearby. It started out as just a simple, innocent game. Nothing out of the ordinary. The boys hatched a little plan to sneak up and surprise the adults. William Martin watched with a smile as the kids disappeared into the woods, Dennis easily spotted in his bright red shirt. But when the boys came running back, giggling out of breath, Dennis wasn't with them. At first, there wasn't panic. Maybe he was hiding a little too well. Maybe he just got turned around. But when minutes turned into an hour, concern quickly shifted to fear. William called out for Dennis again and again, but there was only silence from the trees. Meanwhile, around 7 miles away, a man named Harold Key and his family were hiking near Rowan's Creek. Their peaceful walk was shattered when they heard a loud, chilling scream from the forest. Moments later, they spotted a rough-looking man darting between the trees. It gave them an eerie feeling, though they had no idea yet that a child had just gone missing. Back at Spence Field, as the sun dipped below the treetops, the search for Dennis ramped up. Park rangers and volunteers joined the desperate parents, combing the woods with flashlights and calling his name into the darkness. A storm rolled in that night, drenching the mountains with rain, washing away potential clues and making the already rugged terrain even more treacherous. By dawn on June 15th, the search was in full swing. Volunteers, rangers, Boy Scouts, even park ranger trainees, over 240 people scattered through the dense forest, determined to find any sign of Dennis. But the forest gave up nothing. Days turned into weeks. Hope began to fade, replaced by anguish and questions. 3 main theories emerged. The first, that Dennis simply got lost and succumbed to the elements. The second, that he had been attacked by a wild animal, perhaps a bear or even a boar. And the third, most haunting of all, that he had been abducted. Dennis's father believed in that last theory. He was especially troubled by the scream and strange man reported by Harold Key. But despite the FBI's involvement and countless hours of searching, no concrete link was ever made. Even years later, there were strange twists. In 1985, a ginseng hunter claimed he'd found a child's skeletal remains just 3 miles from where Dennis disappeared. But despite an extensive search, nothing was recovered. To this day, Dennis Martin's disappearance remains one of the most haunting, unsolved mysteries in U.S. National Park history. No trace of him has ever been found. It was a warm, sunny morning in July 1930 when George Stathakis stood at the edge of history and Niagara Falls. A 46-year-old Greek immigrant living in Buffalo, New York, George wasn't your average dreamer. He believed he had big ideas about life, the afterlife, and our purpose on Earth, and he was determined to share them with the world. But first, he needed the world to notice him. To grab that attention, George planned something truly daring. He would survive a plunge over Niagara Falls in a custom-built barrel. It wasn't just a stunt, it was a bold statement. Months of planning went into the project. George constructed a massive barrel, 10 feet long, 5 feet wide, made of solid oak and reinforced with steel. The whole thing weighed nearly 2,000 pounds. Inside, he packed oxygen tanks, food, and everything he thought he'd need to stay alive during the fall and the wait for rescue. But George wasn't going alone. By his side, or rather, in the barrel with him, was Sonny Boy, his beloved pet turtle, said to be over 150 years old. Bringing Sonny Boy along showed how confident George was in his barrel's design. This wasn't just a stunt to him, it was personal. As the barrel was sealed and rolled into the river, the sound of rushing water grew louder. The current pulled it closer and closer to the edge until, like countless gallons before it, it plunged 167 feet over the mighty Horseshoe Falls. Onlookers held their breath as the barrel disappeared into the mist, swallowed by the thunder and chaos below. To everyone's amazement, the barrel survived the drop. It bobbed up at the base, looking battered but intact. It seemed George had pulled off the impossible. But then, things took a turn. Red Hill Sr., a local Niagara Falls daredevil and rescue expert, had warned George. He said the barrel was too heavy, that its size could cause it to get trapped in the deadly whirlpool currents below the falls. And tragically, that's exactly what happened. The barrel didn't float downstream. It spun violently in the powerful back currents, unreachable by rescuers. Inside, George waited, breathing recycled air in complete darkness, listening to the roar of water around him. His oxygen, meant to last about 8 hours, slowly ran out. Rescuers tried everything, but the churning water made recovery nearly impossible. It took over 22 hours to finally free the barrel. When they opened it, the result was heartbreaking. George had suffocated hours before help arrived. The very barrel he believed would protect him had become his tomb, a symbol of hope and ambition turned into a tragic mistake. But not everything was lost. Sonny Boy, the little turtle, miraculously survived. The creature became a kind of folk hero, appearing in news stories, children's books, and museum exhibits. In a strange way, Sonny Boy carried a piece of George's dream into the world. Today, George's barrel sits on display at Niagara Falls. It's more than a relic. It's a reminder of what can happen when human ambition meets the raw force of nature. A tribute to courage, and a sobering warning about how even the best laid plans can go heartbreakingly wrong. Steve Irwin, the beloved Australian naturalist and global wildlife icon, lived a life defined by adventure, enthusiasm, and a deep devotion to the animal kingdom. With his unmistakable khaki outfit, boundless energy, and fearless interactions with some of the world's most dangerous creatures, Irwin wasn't just a television personality. He was a symbol of conservation and curiosity. Yet, in a tragic twist of fate, this larger-than-life figure was taken too soon by one of the least aggressive animals in the wild, a stingray. It happened on a seemingly ordinary morning in early September 2006. Off the serene coast of Port Douglas in northeast Australia, Irwin was filming an underwater documentary intended to showcase the lesser-known creatures of the ocean. Diving near a coral reef in shallow waters, he was following a stingray as part of the shoot. Suddenly, the normally docile animal lashed upward, striking him in the chest with its tail barb. The venomous spike pierced directly through his chest, likely hitting his heart. It was a freak accident, an incredibly rare encounter with deadly consequences. Irwin's team aboard his research vessel, Croc 1, sprang into action immediately. They made an emergency call to the nearest city, Cairns, and began efforts to resuscitate him as they rushed toward Low Isle, where a rescue helicopter was expected to land. But the injury was too severe. Irwin was unresponsive, and by the time paramedics reached him, he was already gone. He was just 44 years old. News of his death stunned the world. In Australia, the public and government alike were united in shock and sorrow. Politicians on both sides issued formal condolences within hours. For many Australians, Steve Irwin was more than just a television star. He was a national hero, a passionate educator, and a man who brought the country's unique wildlife to the world stage. Irwin's rise to international fame was as wild and unscripted as the animals he loved. Born on February 22, 1962, in Melbourne, Victoria, he grew up in Queensland, where his parents ran a small reptile park. From a young age, he was handling snakes, trapping crocodiles, and helping with the family business. His childhood was spent not in front of screens or school books, but in the bush, learning firsthand the behaviors of some of the world's most dangerous animals. In 1991, Irwin took over the park and renamed it Australia Zoo. That same year, he met Terry Raines, a wildlife rehabilitator from the United States. Their connection was instant. They married soon after, and their honeymoon consisted of traveling the Australian outback, capturing and relocating crocodiles. Footage from this trip would become the first episode of The Crocodile Hunter. the show that would launch them into global stardom. Over the next decade, Irwin produced nearly 50 wildlife documentaries that aired on Animal Planet and other networks, captivating a global audience of over 200 million. His style was electric. He didn't just talk about animals, he wrestled them, swam alongside them, and introduced them to viewers with genuine awe and childlike wonder. He was known for his signature catchphrase, "Crikey," a word often exclaimed during heart-stopping encounters with crocodiles, snakes, and other beasts. But beyond the showmanship was a man deeply committed to wildlife conservation. Through the Australia Zoo and the Wildlife Warriors Foundation he founded with Terry, Irwin advocated for habitat protection, species rescue, and environmental education. He was particularly passionate about crocodiles, animals he admired not just for their power, but for their role in balancing fragile ecosystems. Ironically, for someone who routinely handled venomous snakes, prowled crocodile-infested waters, and faced off with some of the most lethal creatures on Earth, Irwin had managed to avoid serious injury throughout his career. He often joked that his most painful bites came not from the predators he studied, but from birds like parrots and cockatoos. He claimed that for some reason, parrots seemed to have it out for him, nipping at his fingers and even trying to bite his nose. It was just one of the many quirks that made him so relatable to fans around the world. Steve Irwin died doing what he loved, exploring the mysteries of the natural world, camera rolling, surrounded by creatures he admired and respected. His passing was untimely and tragic, but his legacy remains enduring. Through his children, Bindi and Robert, who have followed in his conservationist footsteps, and through the continuing work of the Australia Zoo and Wildlife Warriors, Irwin's mission lives on. On August 20th, 2004, what began as a routine camping trip quickly unraveled into one of Utah's most haunting mysteries. Garrett Bardsley, a 12-year-old Boy Scout, vanished while on an outing with his troop in the Uinta Mountains, and he hasn't been seen since. Garrett was camping at Kuberant Lake with his father Kevin, along with 18 other scouts and 6 or 7 adult leaders. That morning, father and son had set off early to do some fishing. Like any boy his age, Garrett had gotten himself soaked. His shoes, socks, and pants were drenched. Wanting to warm up and change clothes, he told his dad he was heading back to their camp, just 250 feet up the trail. It was a short, familiar walk. They'd already made the trip several times. Kevin, assuming it would take just a few minutes, stayed behind to continue fishing. But when 20 minutes passed and Garrett still hadn't returned, Kevin grew uneasy. Leaving his fishing gear behind, Kevin walked back to camp, expecting to find Garrett changing clothes or chatting with the other boys. But he wasn't there. In fact, none of the other scouts had seen him either. The realization hit hard. Garrett had vanished without a trace. Panic quickly set in. Kevin raised the alarm and the search began immediately. What started as a small group of concerned adults rapidly turned into one of the largest search and rescue operations in Utah's recent history. Searchers combed the forested terrain on foot, on horseback, and even with tracking dogs, desperate to find any sign of the missing boy. As the sun set and darkness crept in, the urgency intensified. Helicopters flew overhead with infrared equipment. The rocky, heavily wooded landscape made the search especially difficult. Everyone was hoping Garrett had simply gotten lost and would soon be found curled up near a tree or walking back into camp. But as the hours turned into days, those hopes slowly faded. After days of searching, only one piece of evidence ever surfaced: a single Nike sock. It was found nearly half a mile from the lake, in a rough boulder field. Summit County Sheriff Dave Edmonds later said the sock looked like it had been pulled off a wet foot and then wadded up, consistent with Garrett's situation. Despite 9 days of relentless effort, the official search was called off. But Garrett's family and a loyal circle of volunteers refused to give up. They returned to the area regularly, searching until the snow fell in October. After the winter thaw, they resumed again. Still, no answers came. Over the years, Garrett's disappearance has been the subject of many theories. Some believe he may have been attacked by a wild animal, perhaps a mountain lion or bear. Others suspect abduction, suggesting a stranger or someone known to the family might be involved. Still, others wonder if he slipped, got injured, and couldn't make his way back for help. But with no solid evidence to support any of these ideas, the case remains an enigma. To this day, Garrett Bardsley's story is a painful reminder of how quickly a moment can change everything. His disappearance not only devastated his family, but also captivated a community and inspired renewed awareness around child safety in the wilderness. Though years have passed and countless questions remain unanswered, one truth stands firm: Garrett's memory endures, and the search for answers continues. It was a hot summer afternoon on August 5th, 1951, when William Red Hill Jr. stood at the edge of the Niagara River. The air buzzed with anticipation as crowds gathered, eager to watch yet another daring feat at the falls. But what they didn't know was that this wouldn't be just another stunt. It would be the final chapter in a man's desperate bid for recognition and the moment that changed Niagara's daredevil culture forever. Red Hill Jr. came from a legacy of river legends. His father, William Red Hill Sr., was a celebrated hero in Niagara, famous for rescuing stranded tourists and warning thrill-seekers about the river's deadly power. Red Jr. had grown up in those shadows, chasing the reputation of a man whose bravery had earned him reverence. He tried to follow the same path, working as a riverman, diving into the currents for rescue missions, and even dabbling in a few stunts of his own. But nothing seemed to earn him the fame he so badly wanted. By the early 1950s, his life was unraveling. Financial struggles mounted, and his once strong family name had begun to fade into memory. In his mind, only one thing could restore it: a daring stunt that would grab headlines and immortalize him like his father before him. So Red devised a plan, but not a good one. He decided to go over Niagara Falls in a homemade contraption he simply called the Thing. And it was, in every sense, a thing. Slapped together from oversized inner tubes, fishing nets, canvas straps, and sandbags, it looked more like a pile of garbage than a protective vessel. Unlike the carefully engineered barrels others had used, Red's Thing lacked any real structure or safety. It was flimsy, unpredictable, and wildly unsafe. People tried to talk him out of it. Friends, family, experts, everyone warned him this was suicide. But Red wouldn't hear it. This was his moment, and no amount of reasoning could pull him back. With crowds lining the riverbanks and reporters ready, Red climbed into the jumbled mess of materials and set off down the river. For a while, the contraption bobbed and twisted toward the edge, wobbling like it might fall apart before even reaching the drop. As it neared the brink, spectators held their breath. Then it went over, disappearing into the mist and thunder below. Seconds later, the river spit out its answer. Pieces of canvas, shredded tubes, and tangled netting began washing downstream. The Thing had been torn apart by the falls with terrifying ease. Red was gone. His body was recovered the next day near the Maid of the Mist landing, broken and unrecognizable. The very stunt that was meant to save his legacy had destroyed him instead. Red Hill Jr.'s death sent a shockwave through the Niagara community. What had once been celebrated as brave, even romantic, suddenly looked reckless and tragic. In the aftermath, authorities cracked down. Permits for stunts became harder to get. Safety regulations were tightened. Penalties grew steeper. The age of freewheeling daredevilry at Niagara Falls began to fade. Red's story is one of ambition turned desperation, of legacy turned loss. He didn't get the fame he hoped for, but in a strange way, he left a mark. His tragic fall forced the world to look at Niagara Falls differently, not just as a place of spectacle, but as a force of nature demanding respect. And because of that, Red Hill Jr., even in death, helped make the falls a little safer for those who followed. In the heart of Malawi's central Dawa district, a wave of terror swept through 4 remote villages when a mysterious beast emerged from the shadows, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. What began as whispers of strange animal sightings quickly spiraled into panic, forcing nearly 4,000 villagers to abandon their homes in fear. Entire families fled to seek refuge at a community hall in the district headquarters, clutching whatever possessions they could carry and hoping the nightmare would pass. The predator, suspected to be a rabid hyena, descended on the region like a phantom of the bush. It struck with terrifying brutality, killing 3 people and maiming 16 others. Its attacks were not just deadly, they were grotesque. The victims didn't just suffer fatal wounds. Many were found with crushed skulls, their intestines and private parts torn out. Among the dead were 2 elderly women and a 3-year-old child, their lives stolen in the most horrifying manner imaginable. Survivors were left permanently scarred. Some lost both legs and hands. Others were blinded or left without ears. One woman had her mouth and nose completely ripped away. The beast didn't just kill, it mutilated. Those who survived carried more than physical wounds. They bore the trauma of an encounter that blurred the line between animal attack and supernatural horror. As panic gripped the district, security forces sprang into action. Dozens of armed officers were deployed to the area, patrolling the villages and offering protection to those brave enough to return. The animal itself, however, remained elusive. Rangers and police worked together to track it through the rugged, mountainous terrain, but the predator seemed to vanish into the wilderness after each attack, leaving only blood and fear behind. Wildlife authorities, including Parks and Wildlife Officer Leonard Sifu, began examining the survivors' injuries in an effort to confirm the nature of the beast. While all signs pointed to a rabid hyena, many locals rejected this theory. They argued that the creature did not look like a typical hyena. Its limbs were longer, its movements more cunning, too calculated, too deliberate to be explained by rabies alone. Adding to the mystery was the chilling belief shared by many villagers that this was not a new attacker, but the resurrection of a previous nightmare. Just a year earlier, in a similarly chilling incident, another beast had killed 5 people and injured over 20 before being hunted down and killed by game rangers and paramilitary police. That creature had also been identified as a rabid hyena, though many questioned the diagnosis. Villagers noted inconsistencies in its appearance, unusually long limbs and strange behavior, and some believed that it was no ordinary animal at all. Among the villagers convinced of the creature's supernatural origins was Morgan Amoni, a 30-year-old local who claimed to have seen it up close. He insisted the beast bore an uncanny resemblance to the one slain the year before. Now at Lilongwe Central Hospital, tending to his injured father, he believed the animal had returned from the grave, driven by vengeance. His words echoed the fears of many in the region. In a country where legends of shapeshifters and witchcraft still weave through everyday life, the idea that the beast was more than just a rabid animal gained traction quickly. Some believed it to be the product of dark magic, an evil spirit inhabiting the body of a hyena to punish the living. While the experts stuck to biological explanations, even they acknowledged the unusual nature of the attacks. Dr. Matthias Joshua, the Dawa District Health Officer, confirmed the appalling extent of the injuries, describing cases so severe that even seasoned medical staff were shaken. This wasn't a simple case of an animal on a rampage. It was carnage of an almost surreal kind. Despite the horror, some residents have begun returning home, aided by the presence of armed patrols and the hope that the worst is over. But the fear lingers. The beast has yet to be caught, and its shadow still looms over the hills of Dawa. Until it is captured, or until the attacks stop completely, the villagers sleep with one eye open, haunted by the memory of the faceless predator that tore through their homes and their peace. Labor Day weekend in 1975 was meant to be just another peaceful family getaway for the Newtons from Manchester, Maine. They had chosen Natanis Point Campground, a secluded, wooded spot near the Canadian border, for some quality time in nature. No one could have imagined that this quiet trip would trigger one of the largest search efforts in Maine's history. On the morning of September 1st, Ron Newton hopped into his pickup truck and headed out to gather firewood, driving along a dirt road that branched away from the campsite. His 4-year-old son, Kurt, didn't want to be left behind. In a sweet but fateful moment, Kurt grabbed his red tricycle and began pedaling after his father. It wasn't long before the truck disappeared from view, but Kurt kept going, determined to catch up. A nearby camper, 13-year-old Lou Ellen Hansen, noticed the little boy furiously pedaling and called out to him, but he kept moving up the road. Not long after, Lou Ellen's father, Jack Hansen, the campground's caretaker, drove down that same road. He saw an abandoned tricycle near the campground dump, assumed it had been tossed away, and threw it on top of the garbage heap. Meanwhile, back at the campsite, Kurt's mother, Jill, was cleaning mud off her son's sneakers. She looked up and realized she hadn't seen him for a while. She began asking nearby campers if they'd seen her little boy on his trike. Then Ron returned, but he hadn't had Kurt with him at all. Panic took hold. When the couple ran into Jack Hansen and asked if he'd seen Kurt or the red tricycle, his response sent a chill down their spines. Yes, he'd seen the trike, but not Kurt. He led them to the dump, and there it was, carelessly tossed on top of the trash. But there was no sign of the child. That was the moment everything changed. The search for Kurt began immediately. Fellow campers joined the Newtons in scouring the woods. It didn't take long for the situation to escalate into the largest organized search Maine had ever seen. A helicopter with a loudspeaker was deployed to fly over the forest, calling out Kurt's name. Jill, desperate for more help, overheard volunteers mentioning aircraft used in Vietnam that could detect body heat. She requested one, and authorities quickly arranged for a heat-sensing plane to be flown in from Florida. Search teams combed the woods using ATVs, dogs, and boats. Jill and friends even explored a large hole in the ground they thought might be a hiding place. They dug and searched. Nothing. Days turned into nearly 2 weeks. By September 12th, after more than 3,000 volunteers had scoured the dense forest, the official search was called off. Not a single trace of Kurt was found. Theories began to swirl. Authorities suspected that Kurt had tried to find his way back to camp, wandered off the wrong way, and got lost in the thick woods. With nighttime temperatures dipping below freezing, they feared he may not have survived. But his parents weren't convinced. They believed their son may have been abducted, possibly even taken across the nearby Canadian border into Quebec. They printed missing posters in French and spread them across Quebec, clinging to hope that someone, somewhere, might have seen him. But no leads ever came. To this day, the disappearance of Kurt Newton, the cheerful blonde-haired boy on a red tricycle, remains one of Maine's most chilling and unsolved mysteries. It was June 5th, 1990, a warm, sunny day in Niagara Falls, New York. The park buzzed with visitors snapping photos and soaking in the breathtaking view of the thundering waters. But amid the tourists was one man with a very different goal. Jesse Sharp, a 28-year-old experienced kayaker from Tennessee, hadn't come just to admire the falls. He came to conquer them. Jesse wasn't a reckless thrill-seeker. He was a skilled whitewater kayaker known for tackling some of the toughest rapids in North America. He had trained for years and believed he could become the first person to successfully kayak over Niagara Falls. No barrel, no protective gear, just a sleek 12-foot custom fiberglass kayak built for speed and precision. No helmet, no life jacket, just Jesse in the river. To him, this wasn't just a stunt. It was a leap toward fame. Jesse believed that if he pulled it off, it could be his ticket to a career in movies, television, or professional stunt work. He had a vision, a name remembered alongside the great daredevils of history, etched into the legend of Niagara itself. But there was one problem. Going over the falls like this was strictly illegal. Authorities had banned such attempts after a long and tragic history of fatalities. But Jesse wasn't one to be told no. He believed his skills, training, and preparation would make the difference. He spent months getting ready, studying the river, timing the currents, perfecting every maneuver. Then, just before 2 p.m., with the summer sun high overhead, he launched his kayak into the Niagara River. The current was swift, but Jesse stayed in control. His strokes were smooth and sure as he paddled toward the falls. The roar of the water grew deafening. Mist clouded the air as Jesse neared the edge. Onlookers stared in disbelief, unsure if they were witnessing a stunt or a suicide attempt. Just before the drop, Jesse raised his paddle high into the air, his signature gesture, one final display of confidence, and then he vanished. The kayak plunged over the 167-foot Horseshoe Falls, swallowed instantly by the churning white water below. Silence fell across the crowd. All eyes scanned the lower river, waiting, hoping for Jesse to resurface. But he never did. Rescue teams rushed in. Within the hour, they found the kayak, battered and empty, hundreds of yards downstream. But Jesse was gone. His body was never recovered. To this day, his fate remains one of the fall's enduring mysteries. Some say he underestimated the sheer force of the plunge. Others believe he may have been knocked unconscious or trapped beneath the powerful undercurrents. We'll likely never know. What's certain is that the river, with all its beauty and might, refused to be conquered that day. Jesse's story splits opinion. To some, he was chasing greatness, pushing the boundaries of what's possible. To others, he was a victim of reckless ambition, blinded by dreams of fame. Whatever the perspective, his final journey serves as a sobering reminder. Niagara Falls is not a stage. It's a force of nature, unpredictable, untamed, and unforgiving. Jesse Sharp set out to make history. In a way, he did, but not in the way he imagined. Instead of launching a career, his name now lives on as one of the many souls lost to the falls, a cautionary tale of courage, ambition, and the steep price of daring dreams. In the bustling heart of Guangdong Province, China, inside a well-known restaurant famous for its exotic delicacies, Chef Peng Fan was preparing a dish that was both revered and feared: snake soup made from the highly venomous Indochinese spitting cobra. Snake meat, considered a delicacy in many parts of China, is believed to have medicinal properties and is often served in upscale establishments. On this particular evening, Peng was crafting a dish that demanded precision and courage. He had handled venomous reptiles before, and this cobra was no exception. In a practiced motion, he severed the snake's head, placing it aside as he moved on to clean and dice the rest of the body. With the head separated from the body, the danger should have been gone, or so it seemed. Roughly 20 minutes passed as Chef Peng worked in the kitchen, unaware that the real threat was still very much present. When he reached to dispose of the severed cobra's head, it suddenly lunged, driven by lingering reflexes, and sank its fangs into his hand. Though decapitated, the cobra's head was still capable of a deadly final act. Its venom, one of the most potent in the reptile world, entered Peng's bloodstream almost instantly. Within moments, paralysis began to set in. Colleagues heard a commotion and rushed in, only to find the chef already collapsing. Despite frantic efforts to save him and desperate calls for medical help, Peng died before the anti-venom could be administered. The restaurant fell into stunned silence as patrons and staff tried to process the horrifying scene. One diner, Lin Sun, who had been celebrating his wife's birthday, later recounted the chaos that erupted from the kitchen. They heard sudden screams and panicked shouts for a doctor, but by the time help arrived, it was too late. The police, called to investigate, were met with a bizarre but tragic case. Officials confirmed that Peng had died from the cobra's venom, delivered in a bite from a severed head, a rare and shocking occurrence. Though horrifying, experts later explained that such an event was biologically plausible. Snakes, particularly venomous ones like the spitting cobra, can exhibit reflexive behavior long after death. It's not uncommon for a decapitated snake's head to remain capable of biting and injecting venom for up to an hour after being separated from its body. While the body is effectively dead, basic neural activity can continue in the head, one herpetologist noted. This means the fangs can still deploy venom, making them just as dangerous post-mortem. The Indo-Chinese spitting cobra, native to Southeast Asia, is a creature of both fear and fascination. Known for its ability to spit venom at predators from a distance and grow up to 5 feet in length, its potent toxin can cause paralysis, tissue necrosis, and death by asphyxiation, if not treated immediately. In traditional Chinese medicine, however, its flesh is considered valuable, believed to provide health benefits that attract diners seeking something both adventurous and therapeutic. For Chef Peng, cooking such a dish was not an unusual task. He had likely prepared similar meals many times before, but this time, the cobra struck back, literally, from beyond the grave. Following the incident, authorities ruled Peng's death as a tragic accident. It is a highly unusual case, but it appears to be just that, an accident, a police spokesperson stated. He prepared the snake himself and was simply unlucky. In the wake of the tragedy, Peng Fan's restaurant closed temporarily out of respect, and fellow chefs across the region took extra precautions when working with venomous species. In the summer of 2015, what should have been a peaceful camping trip in the Idaho wilderness turned into one of the most baffling missing persons cases in recent memory. The Kunz family, Vernal, Jessica Mitchell, and their bright-eyed 2-year-old son, DeOrr Kunz Jr., set out for Timber Creek Campground near the remote town of Lador. It was supposed to be a relaxing getaway, a chance to disconnect and spend time in nature. But instead, it became a heartbreaking mystery that still haunts investigators and true crime followers today. Joining them on the trip were Jessica's grandfather, Bob Walton, and a man named Isaac Reinwand, a quiet and somewhat mysterious figure whose role in the trip has long been questioned. The group made their way to the campground on July 9th. It was already getting dark when they arrived. After a quick stop at a gas station and a convenience store, they reached Timber Creek and settled in for the night. Little DeOrr helped his parents set up the campsite and build a fire before everyone turned in. The next morning seemed normal, quiet, and uneventful. The group enjoyed a slow start to the day, soaking in the mountain air. At one point, Jessica reportedly asked her grandfather to keep an eye on little DeOrr while she and Vernal went exploring with Isaac. It was around 2 p.m. when the couple, who had been out fishing, suddenly realized DeOrr was nowhere to be seen. Panic set in instantly. The campers began frantically searching the area, calling out his name, hoping he'd just wandered off nearby, but there was no sign of the toddler. Vernal dialed 911 at 2:22 p.m., followed by Jessica a few minutes later. Authorities were notified, and by around 3:45 p.m., search and rescue teams had arrived at the campsite. For 2 straight weeks, rescue efforts were relentless. Searchers used helicopters, horses, drones, K-9 units, and even ATVs to scour the rugged terrain. But not a single trace of DeOrr was found. Not a shoe, not a footprint, not a shred of clothing. It was as if the child had simply vanished into thin air. Then came a stunning twist. In January 2016, the Lemhi County Sheriff's Office publicly named both Vernal and Jessica as suspects in their son's disappearance. The announcement came after investigators found troubling inconsistencies in their statements. Private investigator Philip Klein, who had been hired by the family, revealed that both parents had failed multiple polygraph tests, 5 failures for Vernal, 4 for Jessica. Klein went further, stating he believed DeOrr was the victim of foul play, possibly accidental, possibly not. He even accused Jessica of withholding crucial information that could have helped solve the case. Suspicion deepened in 2016 when the couple was evicted for not paying rent. In the abandoned property, investigators reportedly found some of DeOrr's belongings, including a camouflage jacket he was believed to have been wearing when he disappeared. Despite all of this, no arrests have ever been made. The case remains officially unsolved. Vernal and Jessica separated later that year, and Jessica has since remarried. Both continue to deny any involvement in their son's disappearance and maintain that they have no idea what happened to him. As of today, DeOrr Kunz Jr. is still missing. No answers, no closure, just a heart-wrenching mystery that refuses to let go. It was a chilly spring day in April 2017, and the thunder of Niagara Falls echoed like a warning through the crisp air. The river surged, wild and unforgiving, just as it always had. But on this particular day, it would claim the life of someone who once seemed untouchable by its power, a man who had already beaten the odds and lived to tell the tale. That man was Kirk Jones. Kirk, 53 years old and originally from Michigan, wasn't a stranger to the fury of Niagara Falls. In 2003, he had stunned the world by surviving a plunge over the 167-foot Horseshoe Falls, completely unprotected. No helmet, no barrel, nothing. Just a man, free-falling into one of the most dangerous natural wonders on Earth. Miraculously, he walked away with only minor injuries. Some called it divine intervention, others pure luck. At the time, Kirk had been battling personal issues and many believed the jump was a desperate cry for help. But against all logic, he survived. For a short while, he was a media sensation, the man who lived. But fame faded fast. Kirk was fined, charged for his stunt, and banned from Canada for life. Still, something in him never let go of that moment. Over the years, he talked about the falls as if they were more than just a place, as if they had become part of who he was. It wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about returning. He believed there was something left unfinished, something more he had to prove. So he began to plan his comeback. In early 2017, Kirk hatched a bold, if bizarre, plan. This time, he wouldn't just jump. He'd ride over the falls inside a giant inflatable plastic ball, the kind used for zorbing. His logic? If people could roll down hills inside these things and walk away unscathed, why not survive Niagara Falls? It sounded absurd, even reckless. But to Kirk, it was a ticket to a second shot at fame. He hoped the stunt would launch an entertainment career and give him a platform to share his story. Kirk wasn't alone on this final journey either. With him was his pet boa constrictor, Misty. Just like Sonny Boy, the turtle who rode over the falls with George Stathakis in 1930, Misty's presence added a strangely personal element to the already surreal plan. On the day of the stunt, witnesses saw the large ball bobbing in the river, spinning wildly in the rapids as it approached the edge, and then it was gone, swallowed by the mist and roar of the falls. When the ball was later recovered downstream, it was empty. No sign of Kirk, no sign of Misty. For weeks, search and rescue crews scoured the area, holding on to hope that maybe, just maybe, Kirk had survived again. But that hope vanished on June 2, 2017, when Kirk's body was found about 12 miles downstream. Misty was never recovered. Kirk Jones, the man who once defied Niagara's deadly grip, had finally been claimed by it. His second attempt wasn't a miracle. It was a tragedy. It left behind questions that still haunt those who followed his story. Why go back? Why tempt fate after already surviving the impossible? Maybe he truly believed lightning could strike twice. Maybe he wanted to reclaim that fleeting moment of invincibility. Or maybe, deep down, he felt a pull, an unshakable connection to the falls that he could never fully explain. Whatever the reason, Kirk's story is a stark reminder. Some forces of nature aren't meant to be challenged. Niagara Falls, in all its beauty and power, demands respect. And for those who don't heed its warning, the price can be ultimate. On a warm summer Sunday in Campbellton, New Brunswick, two little boys, Noah, just 4 years old, and his older brother Connor, days away from turning 7, spent the day immersed in joy. They splashed around in a pool, visited animals at a family friend's farm, and even had the thrill of steering a tractor. It was a perfect day for two energetic, fun-loving kids. That night, the boys settled down to sleep in the upstairs apartment of Jean-Claude Savoie, the family friend who owned the farm, and also a pet store, Reptile Ocean, located just below the apartment. But as the quiet hours of early Monday morning set in, the unimaginable happened. A massive African rock python, more than 10 feet long and weighing close to 100 pounds, escaped from its enclosure. Somehow, the snake managed to slither through a ceiling vent and into the building's ductwork. The enclosure, built like a glass aquarium, had extended up to the ceiling, but it hadn't been secured enough to contain the powerful reptile. Above the living room where the boys were sleeping, the ceiling suddenly gave way. The snake came crashing down. When Savoie walked into the room the next morning, he expected to see the boys sleeping peacefully. Instead, he was met with a nightmarish scene. The ceiling had collapsed, and the massive snake was coiled in the same room as the lifeless bodies of Noah and Connor. He managed to locate the snake in a hole, pin it down, and return it to its cage, but it was too late. The boys had been killed during the night, likely while they slept. Authorities arrived quickly and cordoned off the pet shop with yellow police tape. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, launched a criminal investigation, although they stressed the unusual nature of the case. This wasn't a typical crime scene. It was one involving a reptile, and one that left experienced officers visibly shaken. The python was euthanized, and post-mortem examinations confirmed that the boys had died of asphyxiation. Their small bodies were also covered in puncture wounds consistent with snake bites. The town of Campbellton, a quiet community, was rocked by the tragedy. Diane Fournier, a neighbor who had known the boys, expressed disbelief. "They were brothers," she said. "They played in my yard with my dogs all the time." Her words echoed the thoughts of many in the neighborhood. No one could imagine that such horror had unfolded in their midst. Jean-Claude Savoie, a longtime friend of the boys' family, was devastated. He told Canadian media he had no idea the snake could make its way through the ventilation system. He had thought the enclosure was secure, believing the python too large to maneuver through the ducts. His own son, who had been sleeping in a separate room, was unharmed. Savoie's connection to reptiles dated back years. A 1996 report by ZooCheck and the World Society for the Protection of Animals described him as a young, enthusiastic collector of exotic animals. Reptile Ocean was his commercial venture, a place where reptiles were showcased and sold. After the tragedy, the pet store's Facebook page briefly posted condolences before being shut down. In the aftermath, questions about exotic animal ownership in residential areas were reignited. While deaths caused by large constrictor snakes like pythons are rare, they're not unheard of. The Humane Society has documented 17 snake-related fatalities in the U.S. since 1978, with many more injuries and close calls reported across North America. Their report warned of a growing problem: pet pythons, boa constrictors, and anacondas escaping into neighborhoods, endangering people and local wildlife. Despite the emotional weight of the incident, a Canadian court later cleared Jean-Claude Savoie of criminal negligence. The judge ruled that Savoie had not foreseen the possibility of the snake escaping through the duct, nor had he acted recklessly. The tragedy was deemed a horrible accident.